My name is Sam Godaldig, and I'm tonight's dinner chair. I want to thank everyone in this room for contributing their time and energy and resources to IRI. As you all know, Ambassador Green has been with IRI for the last year and a half, been doing a fabulous job for the institution. Really important work, and everyone here appreciates it. Introductions at Washington dinners tend to run a little long, and I've decided to save the speaker from having to invoke a motion to disapprove, which I understand was a source of multiple headaches today. With that, I wanted to introduce former Congressman Jim Colby and IRI Vice Chairman to introduce and to help finish this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we have just a little ways to go before we finish the program, but I'm going to help certainly kick it off here tonight. Thank you all very much for being here and supporting the work that IRI does around the world in promoting democracy and governance and the rule of law. And we couldn't be successful without the chairman that we've had for all the years that I've certainly been involved with this organization. His name has been associated with this. So it falls to me is to introduce to you this evening somebody who is an icon, a national hero, an icon. And how do you introduce an icon, a national hero? Well, I'm going to do it by telling you at least one personal story. There's a lot of personal stories, and I think probably everybody in this room probably has one or two they could tell about John McCain. But one of my favorites, John always likes to kind of rib you and not put you down, but make you, feel where your position is. And I always remember one of the Codels that I took with John, and we were in Islamabad in Pakistan, and we were meeting President Musharraf. Unfortunately, I had joined the Codel a day late. My luggage didn't arrive, and I went through this whole 2 weeks in August without any clothes except what I could purchase along the way there. So here we are in this meeting with President Musharraf. One of the Navy aides had loaned me his blazer. I did have a tie, and I bought a shirt, but I was wearing my sneakers, and I was trying to put my feet underneath the table there, or underneath the chair in front of me. And so immediately, as soon as we sat down, and I'm next to John McCain, John McCain says, "President Musharraf, it's great to be with you. You can see how some of the members of our delegation respect you. Look at the Congressman Colby's shoes down there." So that is the kind of guy that John McCain always has been, a great sense of humor and a wonderful person. And he's been a great friend of mine through all the years. And I think he's been a great friend of all of ours. There's nobody who has been a stronger supporter of democracy around the world. Somebody who is through thick or thin, whether the president has been a Republican or a Democrat, has been somebody who has stood for the tenets of American democracy, freedom, rule of law, justice, transparency. And that's what the IRI is all about. And John McCain epitomizes that. So we're very privileged to have him as our chairman. It's my great privilege to introduce John McCain this evening. John, thank you.
Well, thank you, Jim. And I don't like to reminisce, but we've been dear friends for 30 years. And when I was first in the Senate, I was down in Tucson, where was a majority of Jim Colby's district. Previously, there had been a group of homeless people who had set up cardboard dwellings at the City Hall and had been there for some time. And finally, the City Council, with all their courage, decided to dismantle that. I happened to be up seeing the mayor there in Tucson, right above where all this was taking place. I left and I was walking out, and there was all these homeless people whose dwellings had just been destroyed. And one of them said, "Hey, it's Colby. It's Colby. Yeah, it's Colby." And I said, "Hey, how you doing, guys?" He said, we want to see you, Colby. We want to talk to you about this homeless issue." I said, "Fine." I said, "Show up at my office at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning." "Okay, Colby, we'll be there." And I said, "Okay, you guys be there." 9 o'clock the next morning, there's about 50 homeless people outside of Jim Colby's office. He's never forgiven me for that. But anyway, I thank all of you for being here and your support of the work of IRI today with the ideals of freedom and democracy under attack around the globe. This work is critical to the security of the nation, and perhaps more so than ever, your continued support is vital. I want to say, Sam, thank you for your efforts on behalf of this evening, and you're our Freedom Dinner Chair, and we thank you for all you've done to make this evening a success. It's my great honor to introduce the first recipient of our Freedom Award this evening, the Honorable John Andrew Boehner, the 61st and current Speaker of the United States House of Representatives and the U.S. Representatives from Ohio 8th Congressional District, which he has represented since 1887. I mean, I think was it the Coolidge administration? Anyway, since 1991. As we all know, it's IRI's mission to advance freedom and democracy around the world. And to that end, IRI has sought to identify individuals, typically from developing countries rich with potential for leadership, to help provide them with the tools they need to succeed as leaders in their own communities. It should surprise no one that IRI has found many such leaders in the humblest of circumstances. In our own country, few others who hold public office understand more thoroughly how the challenges that derive from a humble start can forge individual leadership than our first honoree this evening. Speaker John Boehner grew up mopping floors, waiting tables, and tending bar at his father's tavern. He put himself through school, working a variety of odd jobs. After dedicating himself to building a small business, Speaker Boehner was elected first to his local homeowners association, then to his township board, later to the state assembly, and ultimately to the United States Congress, where he has distinguished himself with his commitment to public service. Through the example of his life, Speaker Boehner's rise to the highest levels of government give aspiring democracy activists around the world hope for what is possible on their own. For his bold leadership and furtherance of freedom and democracy around the world, IRI is proud to honor Speaker Boehner with its 2015 Freedom Award. Just last year, during a ceremony honoring the late Czech statesman Václav Havel, Speaker Boehner said, and I quote, "The thirst for liberty never dies, and that with drive and sacrifice it can transform the fortunes of a whole continent." This is a view that has informed Speaker Boehner's long record championing the democratic values all Americans hold sacred and their promotion abroad. Speaker Boehner has, for example, spoken out against Russian aggression, helped pass the Ukraine Freedom Support Act, and worked to strengthen ties with countries in Europe to stand against Russian belligerents. He's led the fight to expand free markets and free trade, winning passage of trade agreements with South Korea, Colombia, and Panama, and won passage of the Trade Promotion Authority. Speaker Boehner has been committed to advancing the cause of freedom and democracy around the world and supporting those struggling for liberty. And as Speaker, he has supported leaders and activists who have led the struggle for freedom and democracy in their own countries. Commenting on supporting democracy abroad, Speaker Boehner has said, "We know freedom and democracy don't come on the cheap. They require vigilance and rely on the tools of persuasion and progress. One election doesn't cut it. There needs to be a lasting rule of law and fundamental respect for human rights." I couldn't agree with Speaker Boehner more. And finally, a special note. I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly thank Speaker Boehner for all his work to alleviate the impact of Egypt's politically motivated conviction on our staff and the staff at NDI, Freedom House, and the International Center for Journalists. Thanks to his leadership. Thanks to his leadership, the United States does not recognize the Egyptian court's verdict, which allows IRI staff to live their lives without the burden of being convicted of a crime. This was a very important victory for all those who value the mission of democracy building abroad. Thank you, John, for your leadership on that important issue. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great privilege to present the 2015 Freedom Award to Speaker John Boehner for his commitment and leadership to freedom and democracy around the world. John, would you please join me?
Well, Senator, thank you for that very nice introduction. I thought you were just trying to make me cry. Of course, that's not real hard to do. And the worst time to give a speech is when people are waiting for their dinner. So I'll be like Elizabeth Taylor told her fifth husband, "Don't worry, honey, I won't be here long." I want to thank IRI. I want to thank Mark Green, my longtime friend, for his work with IRI. Thank Sam Godaldig for tonight's dinner chairman. And thank my good friend John McCain for his very generous introduction. Now listen, I must admit when I received this invitation, I thought you had the wrong guy. You see, one honoree tonight was a great Russian freedom fighter. One is considered to be one of the most 100 influential people in the world. And the other is the son of a bar owner from Cincinnati. So as I tell people, as I give speeches around the country, this too could happen to you. You know, of all the things I thought I'd do with my life, running for office wasn't high on the list. Actually, it wasn't anywhere on the list. I was happy owning my own business, running my business. And so when I started a campaign for Congress, we spent all the money I had raised the first 6 months trying to explain who I was. And then we got our first poll back, and I was only losing by 82 points, give or take. But some 25 years later, I have to tell you, I am the least likely person, I think, to receive this award. But I may be one of the most likely to understand what it means. It means freedom makes anything possible. Anything. So when I thought about what I might say tonight, I realized I've already said it. About 4 years ago, I gave a speech at the Heritage Foundation about the time of the Russian aggression. That was at the height of the reset policy, and Putin wasn't even president again. But they had Gary Kasparov there, and I remember being criticized afterwards for arguing that Russia was attempting to restore Soviet-style power. One writer even counted the number of times I used the word Soviet, as if the word were forbidden. Frankly, that right there proves my point. We have to talk about these things, even when they're not trending or at the top of the headlines. Denial is dangerous, and silence can be fatal to liberty. And the best thing I can do, and frankly, all of us can do, is to give stage to the true freedom fighters around the world. That's why that way people can hear their stories and be inspired to action. And that's why, as Speaker of the House, my first meeting was with the head of state, was the president of Georgia. Not long after that, I met with a group of opposition leaders from Belarus. And in 2012, I visited Colombia to present its leaders with a copy of the new U.S.-Colombia Free Trade Agreement. In 2013, we took a foyer in the House Capitol and named it Freedom Foyer, and now have a bust of Havel there. And last year, we invited the president of Ukraine to address a joint session of Congress. Last January, at the State of the Union, was Jorge Luis Garcia Perez, a leader of the Cuban resistance movement. And in June, I led a bipartisan delegation to Lithuania, a nation celebrating their 25th anniversary of its modern independence. There we toured the barricades and saw an original copy of their Constitution. They took us out to see their new LNG terminal, aptly named Independence. And we met with a man that they call, in their country, George Washington. As it turns out, he's an excellent pianist. And in a state dinner sponsored by the Speaker of the Parliament, a very nice lady, after dinner, I decided the music was great, the piano was great, saxophone was great, playing wonderful music. I decided to ask her to dance, and she agreed. And so a generation ago, in a speech before the British Parliament, President Reagan called for a crusade for freedom. Well, let me tell you what, this is it. It's happening, and it's why IRI is so important. Because freedom is a powerful idea, but even a great idea is not enough. You just can't issue a declaration and claim that there's freedom. You just can't have an election and call it a democracy. It all takes time, and it takes tremendous vigilance. It goes back to an old saying that showing up is 90% of life. You know why it's an old saying? Because it happens to be true. When you show up, you show people that you care. IRI does this better than anyone, and I want to thank all of you for that. Yet I'm sure when President Reagan said those words, he envisioned it would be the United States leading that crusade. But sadly, promoting democracy isn't a cornerstone of our current government's foreign policy. If anything, it's an afterthought. We see this, for example, in Iraq, when the White House had the chance to use its leverage to protect our progress and to prevent the rise of ISIL, it did not act. Instead, the Iranian regime now exerts great influence over what's going on in Iraq. Except Iran has no interest in keeping Iraq whole and stable. We see it in Cuba. When our Secretary of State traveled to Havana to open up our embassy, he had a great opportunity to highlight the human rights problems there. But not a single dissident, not one, was invited to the ceremony. Something about limited space. And yet, on the eve of that ceremony, dozens of dissidents were rounded up and were arrested. We see this in the irregular warfare going on against the legitimate government in Kiev. Instead of providing lethal aid to Ukraine, as members of both parties have urged, the president stated that Congress wanted to escalate the conflict. His response to our urging? He went out of his way to praise Putin for helping to secure the Iran deal. And I'll say again what I said 4 years ago, cooperation can only be transactional to a point. We can never sacrifice or even downplay our values. But that's exactly what we've done. Just look at the Iran deal. Not only does this make the world less safe, it makes the world less free. Long before we'll know whether we've prevented a nuclear Iran, we will be legitimizing a regime that jails journalists, tortures Americans that it is unjustly jailed, and plots the annihilation of Israel, the only stable democracy in the region. So my guiding principle has always been that you stand with your friends and you confront your enemies. But in the foreign policy of this administration, we see a drift away from our allies and our values towards accommodation with the world's aggressors. This is what happens when America doesn't lead, when America doesn't show up. The void gets filled by our enemies, while the world hears our president say, and I quote, "The United States has limits." Just think about that for a second. America is the nation that gave the world the can-do spirit. And now we're going to be defined by what we can't do? So there's always more that we can do, and there's plenty that Congress is doing. We can promote economic freedom. That's why we've acted to increase energy supplies to our friends in Eastern and Central Europe. That's why we've enacted a trade promotion authority to bring us closer to our allies and better compete with China and others. We can promote religious freedom. As ISIL has grown, so has the persecution of religious minorities. And more than a year ago, Congress created the position of special envoy for religious minorities in the Middle East and South Central Asia. But the president still hasn't filled that position. He should appoint this envoy and show that this is a priority for the United States of America. We can also fight human trafficking. And we've given our law enforcement officials new tools to go after the perpetrators of these monstrous crimes. We can promote freedom in all of its forms. And so long as I am Speaker, this will be a first priority of the U.S. House. But let me close with this. I've always found it interesting that on the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson was not content to recall old accomplishments. Instead, he proclaimed that, and I'll quote, "the blessings and security of self-government would one day belong to the mass of mankind." Ladies and gentlemen, America should never be a nation that thinks in terms of limits. Let us always think bigger and look beyond. The struggle may take longer than we hope. It may be more work than we plan on. But we'll get there. And I'll always be honored to stand with all of you and do my part. Thank you for this award. God bless you all for being here, and God bless the greatest nation on earth, the United States of America. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for those inspiring words. Thank you for your dedication to American global leadership. But more than anything else tonight, thank you for your friendship and your leadership for the democracy community. Ladies and gentlemen, last year when I went to see the Speaker to make him aware of the ongoing injustice that many of our staff were facing, those who had served in Egypt, and from our sister organizations like NDI and Freedom House. When I talked to him about that injustice, Speaker Boehner gave a very typical reaction for him. "I'll take care of it. You've got my word." He was true to his word and ready to put his leadership to work. And thank goodness that he did. We all owe him a tremendous debt of gratitude. Speaker Boehner would be the first to remind us all that he wasn't alone in working to lift the burden from these men and women. So in addition to Speaker Boehner and to our own chairman, Senator McCain, and on behalf of not just IRI, but NDI and Freedom House and ICFJ and others, and the democracy movement itself, I would like to take a moment to thank some current and former members who were also instrumental in alleviating some of the impact of Egypt's politically motivated convictions. These individuals include Minority Leader Pelosi, Majority Leader McConnell, Congresswoman and Board Member Kay Granger, Senator and Board Member Mark Kirk, Senator Graham, Senator and Board Member Kelly Ayotte, Congresswoman Ross Lightnin, Senator Leahy, Congresswoman Lowy, and former Congressman Frank Wolf and David Dreyer. We owe them a great debt as well. And I would be remiss not to mention Ambassador Ann Patterson, who is here with us tonight. As our ambassador in Cairo at the time, she not only provided a safe harbor for our American employees who faced arrest and trial in early 2012, but with her family, made them feel safe and welcome in her home. For the nearly 5 weeks, they were her guests. They were her guests in the residence and the embassy. We are fortunate to have friends in the right places. Ladies and gentlemen, that's enough for the moment. So I invite you to enjoy more of the meal and camaraderie. And on the truly inspirational words of John Boehner, let's also celebrate freedom, democracy, and the fact that we do live in a great country with great leaders like those who I've mentioned. Thank you, and I'll be back with you shortly.
Hello? 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 Good evening. I think it's the honor of calling you to order. But my major honor this evening is to have been asked to introduce Dr. Ibrahim this evening for his service and commitment to transparency, accountability, and good government on the African continent. Born in Sudan, he founded the Mobile Systems International, a world-leading cellular consulting and software provider, and Celltel International, one of Africa's leading mobile telephone companies, which pioneered mobile services in Africa. He also founded and is chairman of Capital Limited, a private equity fund focused on Africa. Now, while he has had a tremendous, successful business career, it is for his support of good governance and leadership in Africa and his tireless work to improve and strengthen democratic governance that we honor him tonight. In 2006, he launched the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and has become one of the leading voices of strengthening governance on the continent. He has said, Africa's future, governance is everything. Without governance, we have nothing. And I couldn't agree more. Through my years on IRI's board of directors and having served as Assistant Secretary of State, and we have the sitting Assistant Secretary of State for Africa here and the previous one, and I think they'll all agree with me that the problems of poor governance and corruption have caused for the continent are unacceptable. I've also seen these problems addressed successfully by government and leaders who govern in an open and democratic manner and who are accountable to their citizens. Dr. Ibrahim has often raised the issue of the division between the governed and their leaders. For him, part of the reason for the division is the age difference between the citizen population and their leaders. In many instances, there's an age difference of over 40 years, with the average age of the population being 20 years and the leaders 60 plus. Furthermore, there's limited evidence that the aged leaders are listening to the youth. Of this growing divide, he has said, political power lies in the hands of the aging leaders who have little knowledge or interest in the ambitions and concerns of the younger generations, and sadly, even less interest in passing on the reins of leadership. Furthermore, he has pointed out there's often a reluctance of the African leaders to leave office when their term of office is over. Through the Ibrahim Prize for Achievement in African Leadership, his foundation is addressing this problem head-on. The prize honors leaders who have been elected, governed democratically, who have dedicated their tenure in office to developing their countries, improving the welfare and livelihood of their people, and paving the way for sustainable development, and who importantly serve their constitutionally mandated term. The prize offers opportunities for leaders who have left national office to continue in other public roles across the continent and encourages the engagement of African citizens in the leadership debate. He's rightly said, Africa will only fully reap the benefits of its youth if its decision makers listen to young people, engage with them, and provide them the education, skills, and support they need to prosper. Inspired by Dr. Ibrahim, IRI has formally launched Generation Democracy, which equips young men and women with the leadership skills necessary to become the next generation of democratic actors in their communities. Generation Democracy joins IRI's Rising Stars initiative, which helps emerging democratic leaders gain knowledge and skills to prepare them to address their country's challenges with sound and proven policies and govern in an open, transparent, and democratic manner. The goals of these initiatives is best captured by what Dr. Ibrahim himself has said, which is, it's time Africa started listening to our young people instead of always telling them what to do. It is their potential, after all, which will decide our continent's future. Let's not waste it. For his work and commitment to transparency, accountability, and good governance on the African continent, it is my honor to present the 2015 Freedom Award to Dr. Mo Ibrahim. If I could ask Senator McCain, and you also, Dr. Ibrahim, to come join me on the stage.
Thank you very much, Connie, and I really my gratitude to the IRI, to the board, its chairman, and to the president for their kindness. I must say, I never expected to win any prize in Washington because it's not my kind of town. I'm an African, and I really have very little things to do around here. And I was very, very flattered to know that, find out that some people here know about what we're doing over there. So really thank you very much for your kindness and your interest in Africa. And I understand I need to, I'm supposed to say a few words, and I'm not very good at reading speeches. I always speak from my heart. So excuse me if I I become a little bit incoherent, or, but at least it will be honest what I really feel, not what any speechwriter wrote to me. Let me just start by saying, Africa is just an amazing place. This is one of the biggest continents on Earth. It is a huge continent. And we only have 1 billion people, all Africa, 54 countries in Africa. Africa is not one country, huh? It's 54 countries. And we are all 1 billion people. That's much less than the Indians, much less than the Chinese. And you can take all of India, put it in Africa, take all China, geographically, put it in Africa, add United States, add Western Europe, and throw in a few other countries, still you have more space. It's a huge continent, and it is a rich continent. Per kilometer square is probably the richest in the world. We have the land, we have the ocean, we have, and not too many people, and you just think, why then we are poor? And that's a very interesting question. We have the land, we have the resources, we have the oceans around us, and we are not many people. So why are we poor? And the only answer, we are poor because of misrule. Misrule and lack of good governance. It's a waste of the resources, it's a waste of both human resources, natural resources. It's a terrible situation which ended up really with us where we are. There's no other reason. And so it's clear to me, for Africa to move forward, we, Africa, need really to take charge of our future and start to ask ourselves, why are we making a mess here? Why can't we run this place in a better way? And the heart of that is governance. And the lack of good governance was really our issue. Still, it is our issue. And good governance, in what I think, or my views anyway, is not just about having elections of 4 years. It's not just about, the appearance of democracy. I come from Sudan. President Bashir has been there for like 30 years or so. General Bashir, actually, should call him. Otherwise, I'll be short, maybe. Anyway, he decided recently that he better, he decided to be a Democrat and to have some elections in Sudan. It's fashionable nowadays to be a Democrat. And so we had 2 recent elections in Sudan. And of course, he won the 2 elections handsomely. And we watched CNN, and I saw President Carter, his people, he was there, I think, himself, and who said, yeah, it is a peaceful election. Of course it is a peaceful election, because the guy won the election way before the election day. So simple, because those guys have a rigged voters register. 15 million voters, 4 million of them do not exist. Do not exist. Villages of population of 100 people registered like 120, 130 votes, when the whole population is 100 people, including babies and including, so that is how people master the electoral or the election process. And when you do that, you don't need to beat up people. Why you beat up people in the election day? And then all those nice American observers come to Sudan, and the nice American TV stations come to Sudan and say, wow, it's a peaceful election. It's wonderful. No, it is not. And it's all democracy. If opponents were not allowed to campaign, if people actually were in prison, and the amount of repression we had in the countries, and the stuffing of the ballot boxes, etc. What I'm trying to say really is not about appearances. It's not about show. Democracy really is about the election, the integrity of the election processes, about the rule of law. It's about institutions, about lack of corruptions, about transparency, about education, about health, about gender issues, protection of the rights of minorities. And it's all this, it's a basket of these public goods which governments and leaders really need to deliver to their people. That is how we really judge open society and judge good governance. It's not by the appearances of a democratic process, etc. Africa actually, fortunately, also had, I must say, a very troubled history, recent history. Of course, you are aware we had slavery in Africa, and slavery is something you are aware of here, I think, because I think I had slavery here too. Is that correct? Yeah. And after that, we had colonialism, which was not fortunate. But something also bad happened after the decolonization process, because in the 1960s, we started to gain our independence in Africa, about 50 years ago or so. But then, if you remember, there's something called the Cold War. And in my view, Africa suffered more in the Cold War than it suffered during colonization. We had two huge camps there, and a historical fight. You remember that? And the world was a chessboard, really, and people jockeying for control of the chessboard. And Africa was a piece in that chessboard. And superpowers interested in client states. And it doesn't matter if you are a criminal, dictator, or whatever, as long as you are with us. This, frankly, was the situation there, because people had other priorities to defeat the other terrible camp or other enemy. That was the main enemy, and in the process, we can trample on issues of democracy or transparency, etc. And we ended up with people like Maputo and Idi Amin and Bokassa, etc., supported by one camp. We ended up with some crazy guys in Ethiopia and somewhere supported by the other camp, and because that was Jumbo. People interested in client states. So it's not a big issue. The day the Berlin Wall came down was a wonderful day for Africa, actually, not only for Germany, because that was the end of the Cold War. And if you notice, this democratic situation in Africa started to improve dramatically after the 90s, after the collapse of the Berlin Wall, after the end of the Cold War, because then the democratic forces in the world were able now to assign their priorities correctly and to come out in support of democracy and better governance in Africa. There's no issue of really supporting client states or criminals just because you fought for us in UN or give us a base here or a base there. And that was a very great moment of triumph for Africa, and things started to move on from there. That is important. And frankly, I'm very delighted to be here in this wonderful place and to be awarded such an honor for an American institution is really a wonderful mark. America matters. The United States matters. It doesn't matter only for you guys. It also matters for us. And it's important to say it matters not because you have the most powerful military in the world, although that counts. Let's not beat around the bush here. But it matters because what the country represents for us, it is your ability to innovate, to reinvent yourself. You invented social mobility. And it is this energy, your constitution, your institutions, even your music, your arts, this is what I call the soft power of this country. And this really matters. So please use it wisely, and thank you very much for the honor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Inside IRI, it is no secret that I am an Africanist. I have lived in Africa 3 times in my life, and not a week goes by where I'm not reaching back to friends in that beautiful land. As word began to leak out that Mo Ibrahim would be accepting our Freedom Award, the response from the Africa community in Africa and here was immediate and universal. What a great choice. I heard over and over again. Few people have greater credibility and greater integrity when it comes to talking about leadership, particularly in Africa, than Mo Ibrahim. Mo, you have honored us by allowing us to honor you. You've also inspired us. We have heard your clarion call for building a new generation of leaders with integrity who can help Africa realize her great promise. And in our own small way at IRI, we're trying to respond. As Connie mentioned, we are announcing tonight a new initiative, Generation Democracy, a global network of young people in Africa and beyond who will be sharing ideas and opportunities, peer-to-peer, finding constructive ways to tap into that energy and creativity that is in this emerging generation. As of tonight, Generation Democracy has more than 200 youth groups from more than 60 different countries from around the world signing up. This network is going to foster creativity. It is going to reinforce leadership, reinforce the experiences that young people have, and if we're lucky, if we're very lucky, just maybe, we'll be able to find the next Mo Ibrahim. And now I have a little surprise. Ken Wallach. Where's Ken Wallach? President of our sister organization. Ken, would you come on up? Ken Wallach, the president of NDI. Ken, I know, feels lost. That's why he can't get up here fast enough.
You first. Mark and I have decided to honor a very special person who is marking her 30th year of service with the National Endowment for Democracy, and that is Barbara Haig.
And Barbara did not know this was going to happen.
And while we are honoring Barbara's service at the NED, I want it to be known that I have waited patiently for 30 years to appear on this stage. So tonight,
He asks every year.
So tonight is truly a democratic achievement. But Barbara, you survived the birthing pangs of the NED and have nurtured and developed the organization to what it has become today, to what my chairman, Madeleine Albright, would call the indispensable institution. The entire NED family and courageous Democrats throughout the world, small d's in this case, thank you for your leadership, passion, intellect, integrity, and steadfast commitment to do the right thing. You have made a difference.
Oh, God. Just say one thing. I just want to say very, very briefly, this was totally a surprise, totally.
And
You wouldn't have come if we had told you.
you're probably right. And it's really been an incredible honor and thrill to work with both of your institutions and really the 4 institutes and with Carl Gershman at the National Endowment for Democracy for 30 plus years. Thank you. Wow.
Well,
Thank you.
here's the gift on behalf of both of us.
Oh, God. Thank you so much.
Well, and I will just add to it that when I joined IRI about a year and a half ago now, I was told that it was not official until I presented credentials to Barbara Haig. That there were a lot of people I had to go meet some guy named Ken Wallach and that kind of stuff, but they said, you're not official, it's not real until you've seen Barbara Haig. Barbara, you made it real.
Thank you so much.
And now I have another surprise. I would like to call to the stage a friend of mine, a friend to many of you here, an IRI board member, and one of America's strongest voices for American leadership around the world. I'm going to call to the stage Senator Mark Kirk.
It is my honor to be bestowing a surprise gift to my political mentor, my hero, John McCain, the man who recruited me to run for the Senate. So this surprise gift is a drawing of a memorial that the Vietnamese government put up right over where John managed to rendezvous his aircraft with a surface-to-air missile. An extraordinarily difficult maneuver in the field of aviation. I would say to you, John, this drawing does reflect, you remember this was put together by the Vietnamese government, and since we're all Republicans here, we don't think that the governments don't do such good work. The memorial that they put up for John had 3 problems, and one was his name was totally spelled wrong. And one was that this is an ultimate insult to you, John. They said that he was working for the Air Force. Terrible thing. So, Commander McCain, could you front and center here? Yeah, it's okay. Here it is. There it is, with all the mistakes.
So I'll provide a little bit of additional context for this. As Mark Kirk indicated, the original statue that went up had a few minor mistakes in it. I don't think that Senator McCain cared too much that they misspelled his name or they got his rank wrong. It was the Air Force thing that really was, he could not recover from. Some months ago, a delegation from IRI and NDI went to Vietnam. And we went to this place and saw this statue. And it's actually a very solemn moment when you're taking a look at this statue. And of course, what it symbolizes, the heroism and the courage of our chairman, Senator McCain. But something that we noticed was that the Vietnamese had actually corrected parts of the statue, I think as a sign of respect. Now, I will add, they couldn't have entirely respected, they still get Air Force wrong. And I'm told that's because it was simply too big to correct. But actually what we're announcing tonight is that we are, as many of you know, IRI is redecorating its offices, and we are announcing that we are going to have as one of our conference rooms, the John McCain Conference Room. And Senator, what this is an artist's rendition, and that we should have, I believe, up on the screen so that all of you can see it. A painting is being done of the corrected statue, which will hang in the new John McCain Conference Room at the International Republican Institute. Senator, thank you.
You're alive, let's get that. Let the record show that John has never reimbursed Uncle Sam for the loss of that aircraft.
Thank you, Senator Curtis.
Mark, I do remember when you and I, when you first were running for the House of Representatives, and at that time the Naval Recruiting Station, Great Lakes, was part of the district that Mark Kirk wanted to represent, and the rest, as they say, is history, and he's continued to serve our nation with great honor, both as a reserve Navy captain and also a United States Senator. And I'm looking forward to spending time in Illinois for his reelection. And as you know, in Chicago, they honor the dead so much that they let them vote. So I'll look forward to engaging in that activity as well. So I thank you, Mark. It's a wonderful privilege now for me to introduce a personal hero whose courage, selflessness, and idealism I find awe-inspiring, and ask him to accept an award on behalf of another personal hero, a man of very great courage and selflessness and idealism, Boris Nemtsov. Vladimir Kara-Murza is deputy leader and co-founder with Boris of the People's Freedom Party. He is a leading coordinator of Open Russia. In the United States, Vladimir was a prominent and very effective advocate for passage of the Magnitsky Act, which President Obama signed last December. Most recently, he has eloquently and persuasively campaigned to expand the act to impose sanctions on those Russian journalists who are so cowed and corrupted by the Kremlin they've become indispensable to propagating the lies and the atmosphere of hate, fear, and violence the regime relies on to maintain power. Vladimir is a brave, outspoken, and relentless advocate for freedom and democracy in Russia. All of his adult life, and even as a boy, he has been a steadfast champion for the rule of law, for justice, for truth, for the dignity of the Russian people. And like others in Russia who place the interests of the Russian people before their own self-interest, he has paid a price, a heavy price, for his gallantry and integrity. In May of this year, he grew very ill and fell into a coma. As has happened to other Putin critics, Vladimir was poisoned in order to intimidate him, or worse. His family brought him to the United States for treatment this summer, and we're all very relieved and grateful that he is recovering and able to be with us tonight. Vladimir, you are an inspiration to the work of this institute and to me personally. Your work is crucial to the progress of freedom and justice in the world. You're a credit to your family and your country. You've kept faith with your ideals in confrontation with a cruel and dangerous autocracy, and you have kept faith honorably and bravely with the example of your friend and comrade, Boris Nemtsov, who died a martyr for the rights of people who were taught to hate him, but who will one day mourn his death, revere his memory, and despise his murderers. Boris Nemtsov is a hero of the Russian Federation. He doesn't need a posthumous gold star to deserve that distinction. What worth is a decoration from the hands of a tyrant and the sycophants and crooks who surround him? What meaning would it have? He is beyond the calumnies and scorn and cruelty of his enemies now. Freedom salutes Boris. Justice proclaims him a hero. The truth reveres his memory. Putin could never understand Boris. He could never appreciate how someone could be impervious to threats and slander, to the lure of corruption and the oppression of fear. A man like Putin, who all his life has stood on the wrong side of history, on the wrong side of morality, of goodness, can't comprehend the power of righteousness. He is blind to the supremacy of love. He can't see that all lies are exposed eventually. Hate is overcome by love. Illicit power decays while the truth endures forever. The people who killed Boris and the regime that protects them are the enemies of the Russian people. They rob Russia of its wealth, its hopes, its future. They deny the God-given dignity of the people they misrule. They are thieves and murderers, and they are cowards. They fear justice. They fear truth. They fear a society in which ideals and morality are the foundation of law and order. Boris wasn't afraid. He knew his enemies. He knew what they were capable of, but he would not be oppressed. He would not be oppressed by unjust laws or by violence and fear. He was a free man, and bravely so. He was accustomed to danger, but he lived for love and justice and truth. He had been threatened repeatedly and demonized by the regime's propaganda apparatus. Yet when his enemies took his life in the shadow of the Kremlin, they found him walking in the open air, enjoying the evening, unafraid. It was an honor to know him, and among the greatest privileges of my life, to call him a friend. For his courage, for giving the last measure of devotion to his country and his countrymen, IRI awards the 2015 Freedom Award to the late Boris Nemtsov. May we long find inspiration in his example. May we take renewed devotion to the cause he died long to advance. And may we too live unafraid in the open air for love and justice and truth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear friends. Thank you so much, Senator McCain. I know that Boris would have been particularly fond of the fact that it is you who are presiding over tonight's ceremony. Every time we'd plan his trip to Washington, however short it was, however packed the schedule, he would always say to me, make sure we see McCain. Make sure we see McCain. And every time he left those meetings at 241 Russell Senate Office Building, invariably impressed with the level and depth of your understanding of Russia and the post-Soviet world. I think it is fair to say that Boris Nemtsov's opinion of you was diametrically opposite of the opinion of the person who is currently sitting in the Kremlin. So many things about Boris were diametrically opposite from that person, both as a politician and as a human being. He was kind and decent, humble and full of self-irony. He was always ready to help others and never one to boast about it. As a political leader, Boris Nemtsov was always a maverick. He always said what he believed, and he always did what he said. He never betrayed his principles or his friends. He never profited from the many high government offices he occupied, a rarity in my country. And he never put his personal interests above the interests of his nation. He valued freedom and dignity, both his own and those of others. And above all, he always did what he believed was right, not what was easy, expedient, or profitable. As a young leader of the anti-communist movement in Nizhny Novgorod, he ran for the Russian parliament against the establishment at the age of 30 and won. Just a year later, as the communist regime fell and the old party apparatchiks simply ran away, he found himself governor of a large industrial region on the verge of economic collapse, and within just a few years transformed it into Russia's economic miracle, the hub of free market reforms, And leaders from across the world, including from this country, went to visit Nizhny Novgorod and its reformist governor to see the changes with their own eyes. For its unparalleled media pluralism, Nizhny Novgorod under Governor Nemtsov was known as the land of untamed journalists. As the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia in the late 1990s, he tackled government corruption, crony capitalism, and the oligarchs head-on at the expense of his own political advancement. As US Congressman Bob Livingstone said after meeting Boris Nemtsov, this guy is simply too good to be true, except he is true. He always did what he believed was right, whether when he placed 1 million signatures against the war in Chechnya on President Boris Yeltsin's desk, or when he led the protests against Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine. In the last 15 years, as my country entered another authoritarian spell, and as so many of Boris's former political colleagues chose the comfortable path of silence or collaboration, he continued to fight for his beliefs, regardless of the cost. His was the loudest and the clearest voice against the abuses, the corruption, and the aggression of Putin's rule. And to many friends, including Senator John McCain, who voiced concern about his physical safety and urged him to leave Russia, he would answer one and the same thing, as I'm sure you all remember: this is my country, I have to fight for it. He gave everything he had to that fight, and in the end, he gave it his life. Boris Nemtsov was destined for much more. He was undoubtedly the best president that Russia never had. But our country is fortunate to have had such an authentic, principled, and visionary political leader. I'm fortunate to have had such a great colleague and such a true friend. So I want to thank the International Republican Institute for this honor. And I gratefully and humbly accept this award for Boris Yefimovich Nemtsov as recognition that his life, his fight, and his example are not and shall never be forgotten. Thank you very much.
Tonight we have, obviously, not just IRI represented, but a number of our colleagues in the democracy community. IFES is here, and I know that President of IFES, Bill Sweeney, is here. The Center for International Private Enterprise, and John Sullivan, Freedom House, and Mark Lagon. And of course, you've heard from Ken Wallach and NDI. Sometimes people ask us whether our work really matters, whether or not we can really make a difference. Tonight, I think you've heard the case made brilliantly and forcefully by some remarkable leaders. John Boehner reminds us about what our leaders must do to lift the burdens that tyranny sometimes imposes. In Mo Ibrahim, we are reminded that the aspiration for democracy and human liberty and freedom is universal. It doesn't belong to one country or one culture, but it is the universal right of all mankind. And in Boris Nemtsov and Vladimir Karamurza, we are humbled by the courage and the dedication that brave men and women have shown in this cause. Many years ago, Alexis de Tocqueville said, "Democracy is like a rising tide. It only recoils to come back with greater force. And soon one sees that for all of its fluctuations, it is always gaining ground." We have seen fluctuations over the course of this last year. We have seen some setbacks over the course of this last year. But tonight, in the voices that you have heard from, we are reminded that democracy must win, democracy will win, and God willing, we will all join together in that cause. Thank you to all of you for coming tonight, and thank you for your great support. Sam, thank you in particular for chairing our dinner. And as always, Senator McCain, thank you for your great leadership. We appreciate it. God bless everyone.